and doing the things you know you can do. Now, we don't see this clubhouse divider with a stage on top and an audience down below. No. Instead, we look at this as the world's largest breakfast table. It's full of motivation, education, inspiration, and even a friendly competition with the positive intention of pushing your momentum in the right direction. Now, listen, if you ever miss a segment, you can go download the Who You Know Show podcast, subscribe, and listen anytime. So head on over to whoyouknow.show, grab the link, and subscribe. Well, welcome to the Who You Know Show podcast by Clear Path Wealth Strategies, where what you know is important, but who you know can make all the difference in your wealth, your health, your business, your career, your relationships, and in your life. I'm your host, Trevor Houston, and on this episode, we sit down with Chong Kim, an Asian American survivor of human trafficking and child sex exploitation, who has transformed her experience into a lifelong mission to educate, advocate, and empower. Chong shares her incredible journey of survival and resilience and how she's used her voice to become a dedicated human and civil rights advocate. So, Chong, I'm super excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the Who You Know Show podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so we got introduced by a good friend of mine, George. This is a Who You Know moment. This is a connection moment. This is a referral, an introduction because of some of the work that I've done with this nonprofit called Not on Our Watch Texas. It is an awareness nonprofit to bring awareness to child sex trafficking and child sex exploitation. And so he connected the dots. So I'm super grateful that you're here. I would like for you to let's go back. I know it may be tough to share some of these things, but I think it's important for the audience to understand, all about this. So can you start by sharing your story with us and what your journey was like, from being a survivor?
Absolutely. I was actually born in Pyeongtaek, South Korea. I was born disabled, and the doctors wanted to kill me. My uncle, who is Caucasian, he's a U.S. veteran, but during that time he served, and my dad called him from Korea, and he said, they're going to kill my baby girl. My uncle, who is from Dallas, Texas, he said, well, you better tell them Koreans to step away from my little niece, or they're going to have a Texas boot up their butt. So
that's how us Texans roll. That's how we roll. Okay.
Yes. So my uncle and my dad actually fought for my life. The doctors told my parents the type of condition that I have, I cannot live over a year old. Well, we proved them wrong because I'm way over 1 year old.
What was the condition, if you don't mind me asking?
I was born with congenital syphilis, stage 3 as an infant.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And I use this to educate teen pregnancies, especially young girls that are still having unprotected sex, that sort of thing, because I am the child that stemmed from the STD, and they don't realize that just because you got chlamydia or gonorrhea, if the baby has it and the baby has it in a later stage, it causes so many other disabilities that people don't think about. Because of the congenital syphilis, I have hip dysplasia. So I used to walk around with the Forrest Gump type of braces. I didn't walk for a while. I was in a wheelchair. And in the Korean culture, that is considered taboo. If you have a disabled child, then they see it as an urban legend that God punished you or cursed you.
It's awful.
And so
I see you as a miracle. You know that?
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Like you were supposed to not make it past a year. That's what the doctor said. Look at you.
Yep.
Look at you. Like you're a miracle. That's a miracle from God, not the other way around.
Absolutely. So by the time I became stable, because my uncle flew out to Korea, put me under his guardianship, And so that meant I belonged to the US government. So the Korean doctors could not kill me. Otherwise, they would be charged for a criminal act instead of a cultural sacrifice. So once I became a year old, I got healthy, and me and my father flew to the United States in Dallas, Texas. And my uncle used to live in Oak Cliff
Mm.
back in the 70s. And it was a two-bedroom house with more than six people living in it. So whenever I hear people today that says I can't afford rent, well, invite six more people in that one-bedroom apartment.
You know, I can kind of relate to that. Growing up, my house was like a homeless shelter, and we had just so many people, crammed in there. Yeah, so I get it. I understand.
Absolutely. The unfortunate part is that both my parents in Korea back in the day, you only had public education up to the fifth grade.
Mm,
After that, you had to pay your tuition. So neither of my parents had a high school diploma, had anything. And so Dallas to them was a high economy, even in the 70s. So we ended up moving to Oklahoma.
mm.
So I always tell people, yes, I'm an Okie. And the unfortunate part is by the time I was three, I was raped by a
Mm,
babysitter from 3 to 6 years old.
mm,
And I didn't realize it was a reality for me because I remember as I got older, I would have like these glimpses of memories, but I wasn't sure, is it real? I remember the guy is real. Am I making this up? I kept thinking something's wrong with me. The other side of it is I was beaten at home. I was the oldest in my family. And
mm,
so there was high expectations in the Asian culture, especially Korean culture. You're
mm,
the oldest. You're supposed to be the example. You're supposed to be the smartest, the strongest. And because with me being disabled, that kind of, cut my chances of being this proud daughter.
mm,
And also, my first language was actually Korean. Going to kindergarten, the principal sent me back home. Says, don't bring her back until she knows English. So
mm,
I ended up living with my uncle, who was Caucasian, with my half Caucasian, half Korean cousins. And so I got to learn English. But by the time I came back home, I lost all of my Korean because my parents were told, you're an American now, you can't speak that language. And so but I didn't grasp on the academics the way my peers did, so I got held back twice. And so, in order to hide the embarrassment from my parents basically told their other Korean friends that I was just retarded. That's why I got held back.
mm,
I'm the oldest of four girls. All of my sisters made A's and B's. I was the only one that made D's and F's.
mm.
And then going through school, I was sexually abused. I was sexually abused by a principal. I was being beaten by a first grade teacher that told me to go back to China where I belong.
Oh my God.
I mean, I had all these issues going on. And on top of that, being sexually abused constantly by different predators.
Mm.
And so I didn't know that was unhealthy
Well, hold
because,
on. I want to stop here, if you don't
sure.
mind. If you don't mind, I want to stop here because, like, I don't think, like, for the audience listening, like, you said from 3 to 6, right? There was somebody who was, um, you said raping you and taking advantage of you. Um, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this space and helping in this cause is because when I was very young, I was also molested myself. And it's hard to get out and share that. Like, it's hard. Like, there's a vulnerability that it takes. And, you know, I think it's a lot more common than we talk about. And it's not talked about enough. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot more common. And people need to start talking about it. You shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's not your fault. If it happened to you, it's not your fault. Don't be
Mhm.
ashamed. but we need to talk about it so we can start solving this problem, you know. And we're never going to solve it completely, but man, we need to fight back for sure. And
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you for your courage, for being able to get out here and share, because you're giving people like myself um freedom to share and to be vulnerable and to know that it's okay. And there's freedom in that. There's true freedom in that,
Absolutely.
right? So I just want to thank you for your courage, for getting out there and sharing, because again, and I so anyways, go on. Tell me more. You know, you had that happen, and then schools, it seems like it was awful. You know, they were holding you back, and then, you know,
I
it
was
can
being bullied at
yeah.
school. So by the time I started puberty, then all the molestation stopped because
Mm,
pedophiles like smaller kids, and
mm,
because I was growing and developing. And the crazy part was, I remember missing being abused because it was the only connection I could relate to. And
mm,
I always explained that to people, that that's why so many victims end up recanting. And especially if their
mm,
abuser is a parent, is someone they trust, they're willing to recant and say, no, they're the best thing. They gave
mm,
me. And the other thing that, a lot of people don't understand, and it took me years later to figure this out, but as I got older and when I started dating, I hated gifts because pedophiles gave me gifts.
mm,
I even had, it was a way to shush me up. Like, here's a candy bar, here's a teddy
mm,
bear, here's this. And so as I got older and when I started dating and guys were buying me flowers and teddy bears, all it did is trigger that because I felt like, oh, since you had sex with me, now you regret it. That's how I took it. Well, the
mm.
guy is thinking, I want to give her something. I want to show her how much I care. And I'm tearing up this teddy bear. And he's like, what the heck is going on here?
So let me ask you this: through some of these like psychological triggers and traumas, and you know, like that takes some rewiring. You know what I mean? How have you navigated that? What tools did you use? How, like, talk to me about that, because the mind is so powerful, and like you said, little things were triggering. Yeah, how did you navigate that?
Actually, my son's father actually helped me. He passed away.
I'm
But
sorry.
when he and I first met, it's actually funny, and I'm going to be very blunt and honest. Back in the day, this was like in 1998. This is after my trafficking, but I was still living a life of drugs, prostitution, and
Mm.
crime. And I met my son's father at a house party, and I was screaming out. I said, you know what? I can't stand it when these dudes, they treat us like we some objects or something. So he got up, walked behind me, slapped my butt. I turned around. He said, hey, Mamacita, wear more clothes and I'll treat you like a lady. I was
Oh,
so
snap. God, hold on. Hold up. Hold up. Oh, snap. Okay, go ahead.
I was
How did you
mad.
Yeah, I was about to say, how'd you react to that? Golly.
I said,
Wear more clothes, and I'll treat you like a lady. Golly. Anyway, go ahead.
and back then I was dressed in Daisy Dukes where my fanny was sticking out. I was in a bustier where my cleavage was all showing.
Mm.
I was showing my belly button and everything. And I turned around, looked at him. I said, excuse me, do you know who you are talking to? He goes, okay, Miss Ostrich Head, where'd you get your ebonics? I mean, everything I said back to him, he had to come back. And
Wow.
the crazy part was, even though I was angry, I was attracted to him.
Mm. Because
I was attracted.
he's probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he's probably one of the first people bold enough to challenge you, to and to do it in a way that was like, got your attention. Like, he
Absolutely.
was challenging you to, like, yeah, okay. So, and so that is attractive, even though even though sometimes it's hard to look in the mirror, though, like when somebody's showing you the mirror, it- that could
We
be
don't want to look at it.
no, it could be exactly. You're like, dang, you're like, it can be triggering. I think, you know, what's funny about this real quick. And, you know, I don't mean to interrupt too much, but, I think our society, we're so triggered, like, especially online and everything like that. People are so triggered. They get easily offended. And it's typically the things that are triggering them, it's like showing them the mirror, right? It's like the things
Yes.
that they know, like, you know what I mean? They get all triggered about it. They get the comments, and it's like, if something's triggering you, there's probably something that needs to be resolved. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? Anyway.
Absolutely. His name was Carlos. And one of the things that he taught me when we started dating, one of the funny things was he would look at me and he said, in order for you to be my girlfriend, two things need to change.
Mm,
And I'm sitting there smoking a cigarette, and I was like, okay. And he said, your clothes, that has to change.
mm,
And I said, what's wrong with what I'm wearing? And he said, you're my girlfriend. I don't want the world to see all your goodies.
mm,
And so at that time, I was like, well, what's wrong with showing off? Don't you want to be like, yeah, that's my girl? And then he said, okay. And he said this to me. He said, I know I'm going to have to give up my main card, but I'm going to be honest with you, what most men will never admit. We want a Playboy in the bedroom.
mm.
We want a Joan Cleaver in the kitchen. And we want a power boss on the street with us. He said, but we
Ooh.
will never admit that to you guys because we want a woman we can stand next to and be proud of,
Mm.
not a woman that we want to share to the whole wide world. And he said, let me tell you the difference between a man and a boy. And he said, a boy only wants what he wants. He wants a threesome. He wants the orgy parties. He wants you to do everything he wants. And he will use, if you love me, you will do A, B, and C.
Mm.
Whereas a man will ask you, how can I please you? What can I do? Let me wipe those tears. I want to be the man to protect you, to uplift you, to do what I can. He said, but if you want to talk about, if you want to vent your problems, that's where your girlfriends are for.
Mm.
Not your man. I just want to go punch some guy in his eyes out that hurt you.
Mm.
That's all I want to do. And so I was like, really? I didn't know this. And the funny thing
No, it's
is,
true, by the way. Let me just tell you something, Chong. Let me tell you something. So it's so true. So you know, I'm single, okay, and I've been dating and stuff like that. And let me just tell you, what you're saying is true. Like, you know, you see some women, you know, they put it all out there and everything like that, and it's eye candy. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's eye candy, but it's not like they represent me at the end of the day. Whoever I choose is the person that represents me, and so I want somebody that I can be proud of to stand next to. And no, it probably isn't gonna look like a stripper or something like that, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, that's not the look that represents me in the best light. You know what I mean? I want someone that I could take and introduce to my parents and say, hey, look, this is my, this is my partner. Like, so 100%, I agree with what he was saying.
absolutely. And the funny thing is, I've had men say this to me before I met him, but it was in such a derogatory way
Mm,
that I didn't take it as a lesson learned. Because I remember this one guy, he looked like a total geek. And I really was interested. I didn't like the guys that looked like the surfer, the pretty boy. You know, I wanted the guys that were dorky and geeky, But I remember one night after I had sex with this guy, he threw my clothes back at me. And I said, am I not staying? And he said, you're good enough to bring to my bed, but not good enough to bring to my mom.
mm,
I was mad. I scoffed and I was like, you know what? You're just jealous because I won't let you keep me.
Mm,
but in my mind, I'm thinking that makes no sense because he just had sex with you,
mm,
you know. And so when Carlos was explaining this to me, saying, "Let me explain the difference between a boy and a man,
mm,
and if I want someone," and the funny thing is, so before me and Carlos dated, when we started to get to know each other, I do want to share this. Um, we ended up getting stranded, and I have to explain this. It's in my book, but we ended up having to share a motel at 3 o'clock in the morning. In my mind, I'm like, yes, we're going to have sex. We're going to. And so by the time we checked into this motel, it had two beds, and he said, "I'm going to go to the bathroom and freshen up." I took off all my clothes. So he came out fully clothed. He looks at me. He's like, "You're going to get cold because I like to turn the air up." And I was like, "I'm naked." And he was like, "Okay, if that's how you sleep." And I was like, "Do you not want me?" And then he said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Then let's do this." And he was like, "No." I was mad. I was so mad. I felt humiliated. So I slapped him. And I remember he grabbed my wrist and he said, "Why are you hitting me?
mm,
Why are you?" And I didn't have an answer because I was used to violence. Like I said, I was beaten as a child. I
mhm.
saw my dad beat my mom. My mom beat me. I beat up all the boys I liked because I thought that was love,
Oh my
you
gosh.
know? And so when I met Carlos, he asked me, he said, "Why are you hitting me?" And I started welling up with tears. And he said, "What's going on? Talk to me. Help me." He didn't know anything about my trafficking at the time. He had no idea where I came from. And so he grabbed my clothes, he helped me put it back on. And I said, "Well," I said, "I can give you whatever you want." And he looked at me, he's like, "Really? What do you think I want?" And I said, "A threesome, a menage a trois? Do you want me to do this position or that position?" And he said, "Oh, you're talking about a sexual fantasy." And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "I got one for you. And if you can do this, that'll rock my world." So I'm like getting ready, like, is it going to be too hard? Is it going to be rough? And he said, "I want to wake up with the same woman every morning. When she
Mm.
smiles, I want to feel my heart skip a beat. When she's crying, I want to be the one to wipe those tears or kick somebody's ass." That's what he said. He said, "That's my fantasy." And then he plopped back on the bed and turned on the I Love Lucy marathon. And I'm sitting there. He's like, "Are you still trying to conjure that up? Trying to figure out how to make it sexual?" And I'm sitting there. And I'll admit, I was dumbfounded. I was like, "How do I get him to wake up with the same girl? Wait a minute. Because it was so foreign to me.
So,
I didn't get it.
oh my gosh. So, okay. So this episode for everybody listening, this is raw, but it's real. Okay. This is raw, but it's real. If you're just now starting to tune in, Chong's had a lot of trauma, uh, you know, went through, um, you know, being raped and molested and abused and beaten, and it caused some trauma, and so that trauma started to um, make you to act out. When did you? Let
Hmm.
me ask you that. When did you start acting out sexually? Because, and you see this a lot, like people that are abused, like um, you see it a lot. So, well, I think it actually goes one of two ways, and maybe you can shine some light on this. Certain people, I think, either run from it like completely, like they hate sex, they hate all of that stuff, like they just don't want to be touched, like they're very very clammed in, and and then others like really dive in. um uh is do you find that's true when you've talked with victims and people that have gone through this?
My mother was very opposite from me. My mother was also sexually abused,
Mm,
but she buried herself in religion. I
mm,
grew up Catholic,
mm,
and so she would pray the rosary. she would say sex is bad, sex is this, sex is that. But for me, it was opposite because I was being sexually abused by adults that we were supposed to trust.
Mm.
I was being sexually abused by a pastor. I was being sexually abused by clergymen, youth ministers, things like that, as well as school. Any authority figure that I knew, I was being sexually abused.
I have a very sensitive question I'm just thinking of right now.
Mhm.
And I hope you please don't take this the wrong way. I would just want to ask the question: do you feel like at a certain point, because it kept happening, that the trauma created an energy within you that started to attract predators?
I believe, and then this is unfortunate, it's almost like until we are marked as being abused, it's kind of like that invisible tattoo. It becomes a neon sign for predators. It's like
Okay,
a moth to a flame
that's what see. That's what
until,
I was thinking. Like it. Yeah. Okay.
yep, because
Mm,
if you notice, when you hear other victims talk about their abuse, it starts at a young age and
mm,
it continues and continues. Unless the only time I ever heard of a victim that was only molested once is when the family intervened. They all went to counseling. They all had help. They taught. The father stepped up and said, because they found out it was a coach that sexually abused her. And so then the parents got involved more heavily. They didn't allow any of their girls or sons um, what do you call it? They didn't allow their kids to be alone with another adult unless the parent was there. Just like with the gymnastics and things like that. But yes, I truly believe that when we are, I call it marked. Once
marked.
we're marked, it's almost like we have this invisible tattoo that is calling all the predators because
Mm.
they know how we act. And that's why it's so important that we educate parents
Well,
what to
it's
look for.
the reason I
How,
asked for that, asked about that, is because exactly like I said before. So I was molested at a very early age. I think I was probably like maybe um, 6, 7, something like that. And let me just tell you
mhm,
something too. I don't. I've blocked it out. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just too. It was too young. I don't remember who it was. Like I literally don't remember the first time it happened. Right.
mhm.
I remember some specifics about what happened, but I don't remember who it was. Like either my mind has blocked it out. I don't know what it is, or maybe I was just too young and I can't remember. But I do remember it happening. I remember what happened, and then I do remember it happened again and again. It happened probably 2 or 3 more times by different people than those people I remember. Um, and so that's why I kind of asked that question. I'm wondering, like you said, I was marked early, and it attracted other predators in.
Absolutely, because they know what to look for.
Mm,
And I didn't realize this until I was trafficked. And when I ranked
mm.
up as a madam, my trafficker taught me how to hunt
Hold on.
children.
Hold on. Let's unpack this. I'm sorry. We have to.
Not a
We
problem.
can't just go into I was tracked. Like what happened? You can't just say like I was trafficked. Like what the heck happened here?
So, a little bit behind the story, my father fell into a gambling debt
Mm,
and he needed to borrow money. Someone he trusted connected him with someone else. Come to find out that person was running a trafficking ring. My father wasn't aware at the time, but because my father couldn't pay it up, they were going to take my daughter, my not my daughter, my baby sister. And my dad was like, "No, take my oldest," because at that
oh,
time I had already been 18. My baby sister was 7, and then 2, I was already out of foster care. Back in the 90s, if you were that teen that constantly ran away, cops didn't look for you. You were the kid that fell into the system, that fell into the cracks. You were no longer seen as a victim. You were seen as a juvenile delinquent, a constant runaway, at risk youth, all of these things. And so I didn't realize at the time, but I went to a nightclub. And for those of you who don't know about the Oklahoma and Texas, for us Okies, we don't see Dallas, Texas as a separate state. Because I grew up in the country, and I'm talking about horses, chicken, pigs, cows. I grew up in a rural area. So every now and then I'll be like, yes, I'm an Asian redneck. And so me and my girlfriends, we said, let's go to Dallas because they got the best country clubs back in the day. That was when Brooks and Dunn was popular. That was when Tim McGraw was popular, all the 90s country stars. And so when I went to the nightclub, that's when I met the recruiter. And he looked like the soap opera guy. He had the chiseled grin. He was wearing a Marine uniform. And because my uncle served in the Marines, I thought I thought all Marines were good guys. Well, little did I realize that he was not a Marine. He actually bought the uniform at an Army surplus store.
Mm.
And so, but I was duped and we dated. And that's when I started learning about love bombing. I didn't know what love bombing was. And he was telling me how beautiful I was. And because I never got these type of compliments. Growing up as a teenager, I was constantly told, you're ugly, you're stupid, you'll never amount to anything. And here's this gorgeous looking guy that's saying, you're beautiful. He's telling you everything you want to hear.
Yeah.
And so we started dating for a couple of weeks. And at that time, I lived in North Dallas. I was living near 635 and Forest Lane, around that area. And he said, I want to take you to Florida to go meet my parents. We were only dating probably about less than 2 weeks. And I didn't realize that was not healthy. Because when you're taught unhealthy behaviors, you're thinking that is your normal. You don't realize what is healthy. And so we never went to Florida. We ended up in Nevada on an Indian reservation, and they had an abandoned warehouse where they held 20 to 30 girls in each unit.
Mm.
My story was made into a film called The Eden, and you can find it on Amazon Prime. You can also find it on Apple TV and also on Tubi, starring Beau Bridges and Jamie Chung, who was in Hangover 2. She played me in the film. But they Hollywoodized it. And, but while I was there, I remember one of the things I remember seeing these girls lined up and seeing these warehouse trucks, semis, pulling up, and each different girl got to go into each of the pods. And during that time, I said, I hate you, God. I hate you. If I die, I don't want to be in heaven with you. Leave my soul alone. And I remember leaning up against the wall. I was sliding down, holding my knee. Now, this part is not in the film, but it's in my book, Broken Silence. But when I was holding my knee, I remember one of the truckers, he rolled the door semi open and a blue butterfly came in. And I don't know if you've ever seen toddlers get so enamored by something simple. I felt a sense of peace
Mm.
when the butterfly landed on my finger. I felt like this innocent child all over again. And I heard a whisper, everything will be okay.
Mm.
To me, and I emphasize, to me, I felt like God was saying, I'm here.
Mm.
I hear you.
Mm.
And whatever you need to do to get out, I will guide you. Even if that meant I had to rank up and be a female trafficker in order to get out. But I didn't realize that having to do what I had to do also led me to become hired by the FBI and ICE to teach them how to think like a trafficker so
Mm.
that way they can go after them.
Oh my God. So, how old were you?
19, but I was sold as a 13-year-old Japanese girl, Chinese girl. They gave me different Asian names. And the men, and here's the crazy part, not that it matters, but in a way it does. The men that bought me and assumed I was a child, they were violent with me. They bit me, they choked me, they saw my tears, and they loved it. They even said that to me. They said, every time you cry, it's my lullaby. Now, when I ranked up
Oh my
and became
gosh.
a madam, and men bought me as a consenting adult, these men treated me like a queen. If they saw bruises on me, they would ask me, who did it? Do you need out? I can buy you out. But at that time, I didn't have any interest in leaving because it's kind of like that. They call it the Stockholm syndrome. But during that time, I was so used to a 3 square meals. I had a bed to sleep on. All I had to do is do what my trafficker asked me to do, and that is sell my body, sell other girls' bodies, and that was it. And to me, that was comforting until when God had led me to allow me to become a madam. One day I was snorting cocaine and I got sick. I would have nightmares every night. And the nightmare was I saw a baby's crib. I would see that ring around, and I looked in the crib, and the bed was covered in blood.
Mm,
I didn't realize I was pregnant. God was warning me, saying, you need to get out. You're getting
mm,
too comfortable. You need to get out. And that's how I ran away. Now, remember when I said that I was born in Korea?
yeah.
Well, I was naturalized in 1984 in Oklahoma. But because I was a minor, I didn't have a copy. My parents had a copy. By the time I was 18, I went to my parents' house, got my naturalization papers, because I didn't know what the state of Florida was going to be like. So I went with my recruiter, and he destroyed all my documents, my driver's license, my social security card, my bank card, my naturalization paper. The only thing I got upset about was my Blockbuster card. I was like, why did you
Mm,
destroy my Blockbuster card?
mm.
You know, because I thought now that I'm a naturalized citizen, I'm a citizen, I'm an American. I have rights now. That is not necessarily true. I do have rights, but one of the downfall was because I didn't have my papers, I would have to go back to immigration and tell them I need a copy. They need to know proof how you lost it. I couldn't tell them that the men that have trafficked me took destroyed it. I have to find proof. And I didn't know how to do that. So I ended up living on the street. I couldn't even get food at a food bank without an ID.
Mm.
I was treated like an undocumented person.
Okay.
To,
All right. So I wanna take another pause. Okay.
okay.
Because this is heavy. For anyone listening right now, it's heavy. It's a lot. And so I just want to take a moment to pause because you've been through a lot. And obviously you're here now. Your story has changed. There's a transformation. We're going to get to that. But you've been through a lot. And it can be overwhelming for people hearing this. It's like it's unreal. It's like they can't picture. But it can happen. And it happens a lot. It's very common actually. It happens to a lot of kids, unfortunately. So let's maybe unpack some of that. Um
Okay.
the this like it's such a big like it happens too often. Like it's a big market. Like I watched that movie, Sound of Freedom, and as I got more into Not on Our Watch Texas, this nonprofit that is an awareness campaign around this, I started to learn like how often this stuff is happening, and it blows your mind. Why do you think? What do you think's going on? why do you think it's such a big deal? And then why do you feel like America? I feel like America, they said, is the biggest market for it. American market is like huge for this stuff.
Absolutely. I believe it's about power and it's
Mm,
about greed
mm,
because it's not just about buying children. The people that are making money by selling the children, they're also making money. When I was being trafficked, one of the men, he even said to me that he was from Moldova and he got into a gambling debt. And now he has to work for the trafficker in order to send money back home so his kids can eat. So it's almost like this constant web, of being trapped. And one of the things that, you know, I want to do in order to educate people, but at the same time, I want people to know it's not black and white. We look at this as black and white. The people who are selling children, the people who are buying children, and the children that are in the middle, that's caught. But one of the things I shared a quote years ago, and I said, not every victim turns into a survivor. Some become the very monster we are still fighting. So as long as there are monsters out there, because 90% of pedophiles also came from sexual abuse. Until we start to recognize that and start honing in, and this is my personal opinion, people can disagree all they want, including LGBT community stemmed from sexual abuse. And that is my opinion. I identify myself as bisexual, but I know it was because of trauma. If I had never been raped as a 3-year-old, I would never have looked at women as an scapegoat from being abused by men. And one of the things me and other LGBT community, we have talked about this and said, we've talked among each other saying, were you sexually abused? Yes. Were you? Yes. And we all had the same theme. Now, is it true that there are some LGBT that was born with this? Yes. But the population is not as big as it appears. The population for the LGBT community have grown because of sexual trauma. And I think the reason why the United States is big on this, and I'm going to be very transparent, church, we need to talk about lust. We need to talk about the men that are buying porn and buying prostitutes within the church, because when they get fed up with porn, then they want the next level. I mean, look at so many celebrities that are filthy rich, but then all of a sudden regular sex doesn't do it for them.
mm.
It's almost like trying to find that first elated feeling, that
It's a
first.
drug. It's a drug.
Absolutely,
And you go,
absolutely.
it's like you start off with the marijuana, or maybe
Hmm.
alcohol, then marijuana. Next thing you know, you're doing crack. Like like
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
it's a drug if it's not done in the right
If
way.
Absolutely. And I think that until we have an honest conversation from church to school in family, because I think the biggest problem that we have in the United States, and like I said, these are all my opinion. You can disagree with me all you want, but there is an evidential trend. Because why would pedophiles go after children? They were abused. They lost their power when they were children. Now, there are some children that have been sexually abused that will find their power elsewhere. It's either external or internal. For me, mine was internal. I ended up prostituting. I ended up going into the sex industry. I ended up becoming promiscuous. I became very suicidal.
Mm,
The external is when you start harming other people. You start sexualizing other people instead of yourself. You start harming other people, not realizing that's how much the trauma. And one of the things I shared with a pastor a while back, I said, you have to look at sexual abuse like an infection.
mm.
Because if we don't stop the infection, I don't know if you were a big Resident Evil a gamer, but I was.
I
But
love that game actually. I love that game.
yes,
The T virus. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So I said, if we look at the T virus, same thing as sexual abuse. When a child's been harmed, like I said, when they've been marked, unless they get treated right away, then there's a way to stop it.
Mm,
There's a way to contain it. There's a way for that child can learn what was healthy, what isn't healthy, what's inappropriate, what's not inappropriate.
mm,
But many times, and I will be completely honest about this, and it ticks me off. Every time I do a rescue and I bring the kids back home, I emphasize to the parents, she needs counseling, you all need counseling. And I always get parents, and it always come from the suburban house family. They're like, no, God will save us. Yes, God will save you, but God is not a magician.
mm.
You have to put in the work.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
what's
she's
that?
going to
Faith
get
faith with
older.
faith without works is dead. You got to put in the work.
Thank you. Thank
Yep.
you. And there's a group that I follow called Gays Against Groomers. They talk about the drag queens, they talk about the transgender, dysphoria. They are against it. And so whenever I have some Christian friends are like, "Oh, I didn't know you were bi," you're going to go to hell. Well, that's between me and God. But thank you very much. You know, but I'm not for, you know, children being sexualized. I'm not for transgender surgery on minors. If you're an adult, that's your body. Do what you want to do. But at the same time, one of the things I think we have also lost is that years ago, even straight people that wanted cosmetic surgery, they had to go through counseling before they got the cosmetic surgery. Because one of the things is we look at cosmetic surgery now as no different than cocaine. We're just putting a band aid over an issue we don't want to face. And that was the hardest thing for me because, like I said, Carlos was the one that helped me. And let me tell you, I wasn't a, a lovable trainee, I'll be honest. I fought, I got angry, I then bit him, I hit him, and he never hit back. He would literally walk out the door because he had to drive off because he was angry too. But at the same time, when he would come back, I would cry near the door. I had abandonment issues. And he would say to me, he said, "Where is this coming from? Why are you that angry?" And I couldn't explain it. I was like, I didn't realize it was unresolved issue all the way back till I was 3.
Mm,
Until he said to me one day, when I finally opened up to him and I told him about my trafficking, but back then we didn't call it trafficking, we called it forced prostitution.
mm.
Because he asked me the one question. He said, "Have you ever told a man, no, I don't want to have sex?" And I looked at him and I was like, no. And he was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because they will kill us." He was like, "Who is they?" And I said, "My master." And he was like, "What? Wait a minute. What are you talking about?" And that's when I told him about my trafficking. And he looked at me and he said, "Where are they now?" And I said, "They're looking for me." And he was the one who said, "Then you need to tell somebody." And I was like, "No, I can't." He was like, "Why?" And I said, "They're going to come and kill me." He said, "They're going to come and kill you anyways. But at least you have a voice and you can say something." And I said, "And what if people don't believe me?" It's a chance you have to take. But somebody will believe you. Somebody will say, "You know what? This happened to me." And then someone else will say, "This happened to me." And someone else will say, "This happens to me." And then he said to me, he said, "You're angry. I get it. Everything you went through, you're angry. And now you feel like I need to collect. I need to collect my retribution." And he said, "But in order to do that," he said, "the best revenge against your oppressor is to become the success they never imagined."
Mm.
And I looked at him, I laughed. I was like, "You are crazy." He was like, "No, I'm serious. If you look at all the legends in the Bible, all the great legends, they were the worst criminals. But
Yeah,
guess
look
what? They
at
were all redeemed."
yeah, oh, 100%. God can use God can use the broken for sure. I mean, you look at Noah, he was a murderer, you know,
Hmm.
and you know, God used him,
Absolutely.
and and he's like, I did he rebelled against it. He's like, I don't even know how to talk. I'm a stutterer. I can't even talk. God's like, don't worry, I got this. Don't just trust me on this.
Absolutely.
I got this. I'll make it work. But okay, so let's talk about your husband. You said
Yes.
helped you out, right?
Yes.
Helped to start unwiring some of the mess, right? Because you were the victim. You went through this traumatic experience, um, got sucked into the lifestyle, started to build the addiction yourself, got into addiction, and you met him. He was the first person to really challenge you. You meet this man. He starts to unwire some of this. Um, but I'm sure it didn't just like a magic wand all go away. I'm sure there was a process. So if you had to lay out a process or a system for somebody and say, hey, listen, I understand what you're going through, I've been through it, what would that look like for them to start unwiring things? Where should they go? What help should they get? What steps should they take if they've had an experience like, even close to what you've had?
One of the things that Carlos helped me was the addiction in prostitution because he put it in a mathematical sense. Because he said to me, he said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Is it for the money?" And I said, "Yes, because it beats flipping hamburgers for $2 an hour. Because back in the 90s, minimum wage was $3 an hour." So then he said, "Okay." He said, "How much do you make?" I said, 125. He said, $125 an hour. And I said, "Yes." Is it 40 hours a week? How does this work? Because I'm not familiar with this. And I said, 3 to 4 men a night. And then he said, "Okay." He said, "Now the men that you personally date, not the men that buy you, the men you personally date, do they treat you like you are worth $125 an hour?" And I said, "No." And here's the funny thing, and it's a lot of survivors go through the exact same thing. When it comes to our clients, we want to get paid the maximum. But when it comes to our personal life, the men that we personally date don't take us out. They buy McDonald's, they take us to drive through. And I'm not saying going to fast food is bad, but the one thing that Carlos helped me understand is if you allow men outside of the work treat you like trash, then isn't that insufficient of your value? And so when he calculated how much I made for my client, I would make $10,000 that week. But on the personal side, I'm letting men treat me like a dog. I'm allowing men to beat me, to abuse me, spit on me. Then I basically degraded myself to where my value ended up being negative 10,000. Does
Right.
that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. So, but I guess again, what are some steps that you took? What did you do? Because I get it. Like he's shining a light on some
Hmm.
on some things, but that's not all. I know that's not it. Like there's steps you
No.
got to take. Like just staring at it. Like because somebody could tell you, hey, you're screwed up. You know what? And you could rebel against that and be like, I'm not screwed up, right? It could trigger things. Like what did you do to get out to where you're at today? There's a story here. Where did you go? What did you do? What were the steps you took to help you to transform your life?
I had to get sick and tired of
Mm,
being sick and tired.
there it is.
That was the major thing
There it is.
because I get so many people that says I have friends or family that's addicted to something.
Mm,
I want them to stop. And I tell them the hardest thing you can do is ignore them because what they are depending on is the enabler.
Mm.
But if I don't help them, they might be dead. It's a chance you're going to have to take. Coming
Step
from an addict.
step one. Step one. I'm gonna unpack this. Step one is a decision, right? You made a decision. You drew a line in the sand. You said, I'm sick or tired of being sick and tired. It's enough is enough. Like line in the sand, enough,
Yes, you
right?
have to get to that point.
You have to get to that point that it's a decision. Step one is a decision. Enough's enough. Okay. What's step two? What did you do after that?
I actually got introduced to DBT. It's called dialectic behavioral therapy.
Okay.
I love it. 12 steps did not work for me. DBT did. And what DBT does, it teaches you how to hold yourself accountable. So
Ooh,
if I'm
hold on, hold on,
triggered,
hold on, hold on, hold on. I'm unpacking the steps here. Literally,
okay,
you wrote a book. You wrote a book. I actually have written a book as well. I haven't published it, but and I love this because your steps, what you're saying, these are your words, your steps. There's a formula here. There is literally
absolutely.
a formula. There's a formula. So step one, draw a line, decision, right?
Yes, yes.
Step
Step two
two,
is
your
finding
environment.
the therapy.
Right. And help,
Finding the
support.
therapy. Exactly. But don't just go to counseling on one. Look for a therapy that's going to make you work at your trauma, like DBT, cognitive therapy, EDMR. Those are the type of skills therapy.
So would you say that you would need to get around the right people, the right support
Absolutely.
system, right? The power of
Yes.
connection, the power of relationship. You know, they say you're a product of your environment, right? So being around the right
Yes.
support system, the right people, right?
Yes.
Getting the
But
right help.
yes, getting the right help, but before you can start developing the right support system, the first thing that you need to do, and I tell this to every survivor that asks me to coach them, every day, write 3 things you are
Gr-
gratitude
Grateful.
about yourself.
Yes.
Three
Gratitude.
things. 3 things every day. I am beautiful. I am strong. I am lovable. Because what happens is when we've been traumatized, we're constantly having those negative thoughts. You're stupid. You never could mount to anything. All the abuses, all in one in our head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's not going to want to talk to you. You think she's cute. You're pathetic. That's why you're still this way. We
That's
need to start making opposite. So any negative thoughts we have, write it down, flip it over, and write the positives. And do that every single day. Because once you start developing a self love,
mm,
that's how you're going to magnify the positive support. Because as
embracing.
long
Yeah, embracing your value, embracing your worth, right?
Yes,
That's exactly
yes.
it.
You
But you
have to
also
do
said
that
something else.
first.
You also said something else. And I think, okay, as far as when I look at my story, the steps that I took, I don't necessarily know, and maybe you can tell me because you teach this stuff, right? What do you think that these steps necessarily have to happen in a specific order, or do you think that they happen? They have to happen, but um like they can happen at different times, right?
The therapy is the first and foremost.
The people, the surrounding, the support system, all of that. I agree. Well, I think the first step is that
The
decision.
crossing the line.
Crossing the
Yes.
line. Enough's
You
enough, right?
have to be sick and tired of being sick and
Yeah,
tired.
because somebody
That's the
could put,
first.
yeah, they could put you in a rehab. Okay, they could go put you in a
Mm-hmm.
rehab, but if you don't want to make the decision, as soon as you get out, you are back to it, right? It wasn't your
Yep,
decision in
I'm
the first
guilty
place.
of that.
But if you made the decision to put yourself in the rehab, then you're a lot more likely to overcome. So again, decision,
Yep.
surrounding, support, people. Then you
Therapy.
said accountability. I heard you say accountability.
Yes. Accountability is having to look at your situation
Mm,
and not play this victim role.
right.
Because there has to be something that gives. Otherwise, because there is, and I know I'm going to get criticized for this, but one of the things I share, especially when I talk about toxic femininity, Women know what they want when they go out the door. When they're dressed up, when I was dressing up in very scantily clothes, I knew what I wanted. I wanted all eyes on me.
Mm,
I wanted men to size me up because it gave me power. That's what I thought.
mm.
And then I also wanted to utilize that power to manipulate. So I had to start writing all of my accountabilities,
And that's so
all of my
important.
wrongdoing.
100%.
Yes.
I agree with that. Accountability is like a superpower too when you finally hold on,
Yes.
when you finally get a hold of it. It wasn't until I started taking accountability for things in my life that my life started to transform and change because listen, I it's like this, when you're a victim and you're pointing the finger at everybody else, number one, no one's going to come and save you. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Nobody's swooping in there to come save you, right? It's
Yep.
up to you to save yourself. And the only way that you're going to do that is take accountability. Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm the only one common theme in all of these negative situations, right? And yes, there are things that happen. You were a victim. Like, Chung, you were a victim. I was a victim. We had things that happened to us, but
Yep.
how do you react to that? What do you do with that? We are still responsible for the way that we act and our role in it. Like, we're still
Hmm.
responsible for a lot of it. So I love that you said that. Accountability. What else? What are some other things that you did to help you to overcome this and transform your life?
The other thing is write a list of people you can't forgive
Mm.
and then do a mantra of I'm letting you go so I can be me. I'm letting you go so I can be free. There are some
Ooh.
people who have a hard time with the word forgive. And so I call it letting go mantra. And I'll email it to you, the letting go mantra. I had a therapist that told me, I want you to write a list of all the people you refuse to forgive. And I said, trafficker, my mom, and I wrote a long list. And then he told me to go get one of those folder can, not the plastic ones, but the canned coffee things, and start a fire. And for the person's name that I wrote, I'm going to tear little pieces as I do the mantra. And you keep doing the mantra until when you see their name, it doesn't trigger anymore,
Mm.
or the trigger does not control you. That's the other thing.
That's good. Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Oh, grace and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's so powerful, that word grace. Like,
Mm-hmm.
none of us deserve it, right?
Exactly.
But oh my
Exactly.
God. Oh my God. And so yes, forgiveness. And wow. Okay. So what else?
The other thing is the constant reminder anytime you feel fed up, anytime you feel the pull of going back to the old life, remind yourself why you drew the line.
Mm, okay.
One of the things, there are times I still think about, oh, I remember when I went to this nightclub, and how I walked in and I was the girl. But then I don't think about the aftermath, the rape, the sexual abuse, someone spiking my drink, me puking my guts out because I drank too much or I got high too much. Those are not the things I want followed. So I start writing down and then also create a vision goal,
Mm,
create a vision board, and make 3 different vision boards. Create a vision board for short term, create a vision board for midterm, and create a vision board for long term. Do you want to grow wealth? Do you want this? Do you want that? And one of the things that I tell survivors, why do we always fall into this trap that just because you're a survivor, you need to do nonprofit? And they're like, "Are you?" No, I want to build wealth. I can't help people if I'm broke,
mm.
you know?
All right. So having a goal, having a purpose, right? When did that happen for you? At what point did the purpose, because like now they're making movies about your story and you've written a book and like things have changed dramatically for you. Um when did all of that start to come about and what ignited that?
So I'll share this much. February 22nd, 2001 was my clean date. I was going to commit suicide.
Mm.
Back then, I used to listen to AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Led Zeppelin, and I was going to kill myself. And I was at White Rock Lake. And I kid you not, a woman was in my car and she said, "Well, if you're going to blast yourself, what are you going to do with your son? You going to let him think that both parents committed suicide? None of you guys love him?" And I was like, "No, I love him." "Then what are you doing sitting here with a gun in your hand? Pick up your big girl panties on, wipe them damn tears, and go be a parent. If not, give him up for adoption." And I had placed my daughter for adoption. So my daughter came first. She was the one that made me run away so I could be free. And I placed her for adoption, and the grief was unbearable. It was hard. And then when I had my son, I became an absent parent in the first 7 to 8 months of his birth. I was out getting high, I was prostituting myself, everything. And so I felt more and more sorry for myself. I was like, "I'm pathetic. This is horrible." And that's when this angel came to me and she said, "Well, place him for adoption then before you go off yourself. At least he'll have someone that will love him." And I was mad and I said, "No, I'm tired of people telling me to place him for adoption. Then he's not going to live to see 18 years old if you die today." And I said, I can't let that happen. Then you need to be alive in order to see him grow."
Mm.
And I wiped my tears. I threw the cocaine in the water. I threw the gun in the water, put my car in reverse, drove back. I saw my son standing on his crib, and I grabbed him and hugged him. And I apologized. Now parenting was not easy for me. It took me a long time. The other thing that I always tell people, when you're going through this transformation, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall back, but dust yourself off and pick yourself up again. Because
So
the
that was the
enemy wants to
moment.
remind you.
You,
Yes,
that was the moment, okay, that was your line in the sand moment.
yes.
That was your line in the sand moment, was when you were literally about to take your own life,
Hmm.
and you heard a voice, and you drew that line in the sand, and you know took action. Now, again, what was when did things start to again, like they're starting to, like, you started speaking about it, like what happened, and excuse me, but I'd love to keep this conversation flowing I mean, there's so much to unpack here, but like, if you could summarize what happened, like what were the steps that happened next to get you to where you're at now? They're making movies about your story and all this stuff.
So I ended up moving to Minnesota. And in order for me to get my identity back, I had to file for disability. And so, because you have to be a US citizen in order to apply for federal benefits. And so during that time, I was bored. So I became aware that if I'm bored, it will lead me to relapse.
Mm,
So I ended up volunteering. I ended up volunteering for
mm.
social justice. I ended up becoming a legal advocate, and that's when I first learned about human trafficking in 2003. But they brought foreign women, and
Chong,
I
Chong,
and
hold on. I'm sorry.
go
I
ahead.
I, I want to unpack. Like, listen, I got this piece of paper in front of me. Okay. And this piece of paper is the different chapters of the book that I've written. Again, it hasn't published yet, but the chapters are all the steps that I took, right? And as you're saying this, volunteering, right? That was one of my steps. You're like, literally, as we're going through, checking,
Yep,
right? Um,
because
and I
volunteering to me is a way for us survivors to not think of ourselves
absolutely
and to think outside the box and to let us
think
know,
think
we're not
bigger
the only
than
one
yourself.
wounded.
Think bigger than
Absolutely.
yourself, right?
And that's how you will find healthy support system,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
through philanthropy work. The next step I would say would also be find something as a hobby, not as a business, as a hobby, whether it's painting, creative writing, do something proactive. Trade that addiction impulse to something proactive.
Mm,
One of the things I didn't like about NA or 12 step is that it was constant. It was like, we need to talk about the addiction. We need to talk about the addiction. I don't want to talk about the addiction because it's going to make me want to go back. I don't want to hear the glory days of the high. I want to be able to utilize why I was addicted in the first place and utilize it in expressing my anger and emotion. That is through art, filmmaking, writing a script, being able to express myself in a healthy
that's what I
setting.
was saying. I see. I call it, okay. Here, I call it a positive obsession to channel your energy, right? Because like you need a positive addiction, not a negative addiction. You
Yes,
need something
yes.
that's like and almost like an obsession too. It is an addiction, but you need to be obsessed with something positive, with something healthy, with something that feeds your soul. And you'll see a lot of addicts or ex addicts, or recovered addicts, whatever you want to call them. You'll see a lot in the gym. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
yes.
You will, because and they get
Yes.
addicted to it. They're like, "Argh!" Like they get addicted to it. But you know what? Hey, whatever. That's better than them out on the streets. Doing whatever. So yeah, a positive obsession to channel your energy. I totally agree with that. What are just real quick because we only got a few more minutes. I want to make sure we can unpack because there's so much more here. Like I think the audience, do you lay these steps out in your framework? Do you lay this out in your book?
I don't in my book,
Okay.
but on my website, I'm offering a personal safety course.
Okay.
And it starts with devices, then online grooming, then games and apps. It's a 3-part course, and I'm offering it to anyone because a lot of these educational stuff are only held for law enforcement and NGOs. But if you're a parent, an uncle, a dad, someone who cares about kids, and you have nieces and nephews coming over, you want to also be aware of these things because according to Homeland Security, 19 seconds a child gets groomed. And one of the things I want to definitely share, my book Broken Silence, I will have to give you one and I'll sign it.
Please
um,
do.
but if you go to also e40sfilm.com, E40S stands for every 40 seconds.
Mm,
Every 40 seconds in America, a child goes missing. One in every fourth falls into human trafficking.
mm,
Now that we've come back from the pandemic, it went from 400,000 children that go missing annually to bumped up to 7 to 800,000. Because now that we have devices, we're now having perpetrators coming into our phones. And if
mm.
we're not equipped on how to protect our devices, that means keep your Bluetooth off. Use a wired device when you're driving because I use my wired device for my navigation. I don't use Bluetooth. There's so many things, and people can follow me on TikTok, on YouTube. I share all these tips. I even teach parents how to ask questions to your kids that is not a one word answer. I never ask my son, how was school? Because I know he's going to say, fine,
Meh.
cool.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if I ask him, who made you smile today? How did they make you smile? Because a lot of times, even if they made you smile, isn't always healthy.
Mm,
For me, when I was little, even though I had experienced sexual abuse, I didn't realize that me and some of the girls in my school, we were doing sexual things to each other. So
mm.
those are things that we need to be aware of. How does your children play? Are there other kids also sexually exploiting your child? These are things we need to talk about.
It definitely needs to be talked about, and it's a very sensitive subject. This episode is, it's a sensitive subject, and like as you were talking earlier, there were so many times where it was just very overwhelming for me to hear, right?
Hmm.
it was like I'm listening and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it breaks my heart. Um, some of the things that I'm hearing. And so, but it's because it's so important, and it's real, and we need to talk about it. We can't hide this stuff, and that's the problem. It's the same reason why like suicide is such a big issue, is because I think the silence, people don't talk about it enough. Like when people commit suicide, it's like, shh, we don't want to talk about it. People will hide it and they won't tell the real story, what really happened. They'll try to make up stories about what happened. And like it's not right. We need to talk about it, and that's the only way that we can really face this thing head on. So guys, I would encourage you to check out Chong's website, check out her book. um what else can we do to support the mission, because I know you've got a big mission that you're on.
Now that we're coming to voting seasons, the one thing I cannot stress enough: do not worry about the national candidates. You want to go to your local electors. Ask them questions. Say, what are you doing in our town that has to do with human trafficking? What are you willing to do and change? And hold them accountable. If
That's good.
they are not following up with you, talk to the judges. Are they penalizing traffickers?
Mm,
Are they penalizing adults buying sex for children? And hold them accountable. If nothing is changed, then make sure he gets impeached. We
mm,
need to start holding our electors accountable from the local
absolutely.
level, judicial level, even on the legislation. But on the legislation level, we can't do a whole lot, but we can do a lot more in our town, in
Yes.
our district, in our state, and that's the most important thing. And two, please do not pick people that you like. Do your research, regardless of whether you're re- uh, right wing, left wing, independent, green. Do your research. How do their policy will affect our lives, and how their lack of policy, can also contribute to human trafficking. That's another thing.
Well, Chong, thank you so much for being here on the show today. Guys, make sure you go to check in with her, go follow her, and that way you can get more. Because again, there wasn't enough time to really unpack everything I want to unpack here. Your story is just, it's got so much in there. So, but make sure you guys follow her to learn more. And again, Chong, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Guys, that's the show. It's all about who you know. Bye.